So, um, to do the basic appliance setup, we need to connect to the appliance and open management session. When you get new big IP appliance, there is a few ways that you can use to connect to the appliance. Obviously, there is a serial interface with the big IP hardware where you can connect your laptop or your PC using serial cable to the appliance. So once you connect the serial cable to the appliance, open serial connection using PuTTY, Secure CRT, whatever software you use, you will land on the command line. You will land on the big IP command line. Another way to connect to the big IP device is using the management interface. Every big IP hardware comes with dedicated management Ethernet interface. This management interface comes with a default IP address of 192.168.1.245. So if the big IP is connected, if the management interface of the big IP connected to a management switch or any other switch, you can connect your laptop to the switch, get an IP address from the same subnet, and open SSH connection to the management IP of the big IP. You can also connect direct your laptop via Ethernet cable connected direct to the big IP management interface, get an IP address from the same subnet and SSH. It's important to note that the default username for the CLI, for SSH, or for the console, when you open a console, the username is root, the password is default, the word default. For the GUI, when we open a GUI management, the default username and password is admin. So whether you use console or you use the management interface with SSH, you land on the command line. The command to configure the management IP address, to change the management IP address to an IP address you want, is config. So when you type in the command line config, enter, you will go to the configuration utility. This configuration utility will allow you to change the management IP address of the big IP, the subnet mask, and the gateway of the big IP. So the command to launch the configuration utility is config. Now, once you set up an IP address for the big IP, now we need to connect to the management IP address of the big IP using HTTPS. So as you can see on the screen, we configured 192.168.1.5. So we HTTPS. Obviously, when you first open HTTPS, the certificate will not be accepted by the browser. You have to click accept. You put the username and password. You remember the GUI username and password is admin. Once you log in, because this is the first time we open a GUI management with this big IP appliance, it will take us to the setup utility wizard. There is a wizard of a couple of steps. The big IP will guide us to do the basic configuration. These are the steps that we will go through. So welcome, this is the setup utility. We click next. The first step is activating the license. So you have purchased the LTM license from F5, and we are doing a setup for this appliance. We need to activate the LTM, which is the load balancing software module on the big IP. When you click next, when you click activate on the license page, you get this page. So this is where you need to put the base registration key. When you buy a license from F5, they will send you the registration key, the license key. So you should have this from the F5 via email or via any other way. You put the base registration key here, and we have two ways to proceed further with activating the license. If the big IP appliance, for example, the management IP 192.168.1.5, if this IP is capable of reaching the internet, there is internet connectivity provided to this IP address, I can say automatic. So I want to automatically activate the license. The traffic or the internet traffic should go via management interface, go to the F5 website and get and fetch the license. So it's automatic. We don't do any step. We are just providing the base registration key, and we're telling the big IP, go to the internet and fetch the license automatically. Go to the internet using the management interface. However, if the big IP appliance doesn't have internet connectivity, then we have to go with the manual license activation. You select the manual license activation. Of course, you have the registration key, and then you click next. Once you click next using this registration key, the big IP appliance will generate a dossier. This is the text of the dossier. So you select this text, copy it, and then click on the link referred here. So as you can see, there is a link here for the F5 licensing server. So of course, when you click this link, it will open on your laptop browser. So the laptop you are using to configure the big IP should have internet connectivity. So internet connectivity is mandatory, be it on the big IP appliance or on your laptop that you are using to configure the big IP. So copy the dossier, click on the F5 licensing server link, then it will open the activate.f5.com. Paste the dossier here and click next. Accept the end user licensing agreement and click next. It will generate the license for you. This is the text of the license, so you can copy it from this text box, or you can, it's a good idea to download the license. It will download the license file, it will download the text file that contains the license. It's good to keep it in a safe location, safe storage, so that later on, if you need to relicense the device, you have the license file. You don't have to go through the generating dossier and going to the license server again. Go back once you get the license from the big IP. Go back to the setup utility and you paste the license text here. Click next and done. The big IP device now is licensed. Now, the next step on the setup utility will be resource provisioning. Remember, we said that big IP is a hardware appliance, and LTM is a software module that can be activated on big IP hardware. This is where you tell the big IP that this big IP appliance, I want it to act as a load balancer. I want to activate the local traffic manager software module. Now, you can see the management software module will be always activated. You cannot disable it because this is the minimum. To manage the big IP appliance, you need the management software module, the management module. So this is something you cannot untick. But other software modules, for example, the AFM, the firewall module, you can enable or you can disable. You see that there are some software modules unlicensed. They are not included in the base license that we have purchased. The base license we have purchased includes LTM, ASM, DNS, AVR, the reporting module, APM, and AFM. Others require a separate license. This is what is referred here. If I go back, add-on registration keys. So if, for example, you purchased the PEM, policy enforcement module, F5 will give you add-on registration key, so you include it here. Then once you license the device, the PEM will be mentioned as licensed here. So anything licensed, we can activate. In this example, in this course, actually, we're gonna work on the LTM, local traffic manager, so we will activate the LTM. Now, when you activate a module, in terms of resource provisioning, you have 3 levels of resource provisioning. Remember, the big IB is a hardware, comes with CPU, disk storage, and memory, RAM. So every software module you activate on the big IB will have to allocate some hardware resources. This is where we control the amount of hardware resources the module will allocate. If you say dedicated, if you click on this drop-down menu, say dedicated, means the LTM module will reserve its resources and will not allow any other module to share with it. It will take the hardware resources required for the LTM and will not allow any other software module to share the resources. If you say nominal, it means start with the least amount of resources required for the LTM module to function. And if the traffic increases, if we have more users, more traffic, increase the resources, allocate more resources. So we allocate resources as we grow. Minimum means allocate the minimum amount of resources for the LTM to work and never allocate more resources. So if your big IP, if you purchase the big IP to act as mainly load balancer, and load balancing is critical for you, so you may want to select dedicated from day one, so that later on, if you or any other administrator try to activate another software module, the new software module will not affect the resources allocated to the LTM, because we have the LTM as critical module. We want to make sure that LTM always has access to the resources required for LTM to function properly. If you have only not really critical applications, you can start with nominal. If you're not sure, if you are trying to activate a couple of modules, LTM, ASM, and AFM, and you're not sure how much you want to allocate for each module, then you can start 3 of them with nominal. And if, for example, the AFM require more resources, it will be able to allocate more resources. With nominal, we start with the minimum, and if we need, we allocate more. This is nominal is a good option when we are activating multiple modules and we don't really know which module will require more resources. Now, minimum is good when you are testing. So let's say, as we said, in this scenario, we have the LTM as the critical module. We want the LTM to have dedicated resources. And we have the ASM started as nominal. So we are testing the ASM, which is our second priority. But we are not certain about the amount of resources required by the ASM. While we are testing ASM, we need to test the AFM as well. So I want to enable the AFM to test some firewall features. But I don't want the AFM to affect the ASM or LTM. So I choose minimum. So I don't want the AFM to allocate more resources. I want it to start with the minimum amount of resources, only the minimum. I'm not sending production traffic to the AFM. I'm just doing few tests, few use cases. So it's a good idea to use the minimum for when you are testing specific modules. So on the management resource provisioning, we see here we selected small. We selected small here because we're doing a lab. We don't really need much resources for the management software, the big IB management software. So this is good for labs to avoid allocating more resources for the management software. If you are deploying the LTM in a production network, but it's a small to medium, less than 2000 configured objects. If you have less than 2000 configured objects, you can select medium. If you are deploying LTM in a large environment, more than 2000 configured objects, you have to go with the large. So to allocate more resources for the management module. There is a command that we will see later on once we get our hands on the command line to identify or to get the number of configured objects in any big IB device. You can execute this command to get the number of configured objects. Once you finish provisioning and click next, you get to the device certificate step. So as we said, when you first access the GUI of the big IB, there is a self-signed certificate and you get warning by the browser. This is where the device is showing us what is the current self-signed certificate used by the big IB. Now in production networks, usually organization, they have certificate authority where they use it to sign certificates. So if you have within your organization a certificate authority, it's good to request a certificate from the CA, sign it from the CA, and import it on the big IB so that you do not get warning when you open the big IB management. For the sake of this lab, we can still work with the self-signed certificate. Click next to use the self-signed certificate. Next is the platform step. This is where the big IB will give you another opportunity to change the management IP. If you would like to change the management IP, if you would like to add a management route to the big IB, so that if there is a remote network, let's say for example 10.0.0.0, you want this network to be routed through the management interface, you can add the management route here. We will get more details about the routing. We will explain more details about the routing in upcoming sections, but for the time being, this management route, you specify remote subnets, other subnets other than the management subnet. You want these subnets to be reachable through the management interface, not through other data interfaces. Any route you add it as a management route means the target subnet will always be reachable via the management interface, not via the other data interface. Host name, we have to give the appliance host name. Host IP address, use the management. So this host name will be linked to this IP address. The host name that we specified here will be linked to this. So when you go to the DNS and configure a record for the big IB, use this host name with this IP address. User administration, we have to specify the root account password. So when you first access the big IB using SSH or console, you use the default root username and password, it will ask you to change the password. Here is another opportunity if you would like to change the SSH password for the root account. You can disable the SSH access altogether. You can this disable login actually will disable the root account. SSH access enabled, you can disable SSH for root and any other account. So if I say disable login here, this means disable the root account. If I untick this checkbox enabled next to the SSH access, this means I am disabling the SSH access to this big IP device. Root and non-root account will not be able to SSH to this appliance. SSH allow, SSH IP allow, this is where you can specify what are the source subnets or the source IP addresses that are allowed to do SSH to the big IP. This is a good hardening practice, security hardening, and it is recommended by the vendors, by the security standards. So within our organization, we have the IT team, we have help desk team, we have finance, HR, every different department within our organization, they use different subnet, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, etc. etc. Now, think about who is within our organization allowed to open the management of the big IP, to open session with this management IP address. Usually it is the IT team, be it security or the sysadmin. So it's a good idea to specify here only those subnets allowed to access the big IP. The subnet of the IT team or the subnet of the security team, the 10.5.0 or 10.6, for example. It's a good practice, and it's recommended by the vendors and the security standards, as I said. Now, there are command lines that we can use to see the management IP address and to change the management IP address. We will get through this once we practice the command line. Once we're set on this page, we click next. We get to the network step. Now, at this point in time, if you click next, you will be taken through the wizard to configure the IP addresses for the different interfaces. For the outside, inside interface, configure the high availability, the failover, etc., which is something we don't want to do now. We will do it later. So at this point in time, we are going to click finish the setup utility because we're done with the basic configuration. At any point in time later on, you would like to restart the setup utility wizard. If you click on the F5 logo, anytime you will go to the home page. Down here, run the setup utility. So you can run the setup utility again and again. If you want to change any of these configuration, you can run the setup utility again. Now, keep in mind, you can change any of these settings manually. You don't have to. For example, if you're changing the device certificate, you can change it without going again through the setup utility. But if you would like to go through the setup utility, you can run the setup utility. Click on this link to invoke and run the setup utility